The morning of October 17, 2022, began like any other in Harmony Creek, or so it seemed. The air usually smelled of fresh bread from Maria's sweet mornings. Maria Sanchez, everyone knew her. Her bakery was the heart of the small town. People gathered there. They talked. They shared news. It was a place of comfort, a daily ritual for many. But that Tuesday, the scent of cinnamon rolls didn't fill the air. Instead, a different, colder feeling spread through the quiet streets. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. Police tape. That's what greeted early risers. Yellow tape, stark against the familiar red brick of Maria's bakery. It fluttered in the chill autumn breeze. A silent, ugly warning. The bakery door was slightly ajar. Inside, chaos. Flour dust settled not on warm loaves but on overturned chairs, a broken display case, and Maria. She wasn't at the counter with her usual bright smile. Paramedics were there. The siren's wail had cut through the dawn. It was a sound that didn't belong in Harmony Creek. Not like this. News travels fast in a small town. Too fast sometimes. Whispers turned into hushed conversations, then into worried phone calls. Maria had been attacked, robbed. She was in the hospital. Serious condition, they said. The community felt a collective shock. This wasn't supposed to happen here. Not in Harmony Creek. Not to Maria. She was kind. She gave cookies to children. She remembered everyone's order. The bakery wasn't just a business, it was a cornerstone. And now, it was a crime scene. The impact was immediate, deep. People felt violated. Their safe space, shattered. The sweetness of their mornings, soured by an act of desperation. Or was it malice? No one knew for sure, not yet. All they knew was that Maria was hurt, and their town felt a little less like home. The bakery remained closed, dark, a constant reminder of that terrible morning. The community waited, they prayed, and they wondered who could do such a thing, and why. Maria Sanchez was in her late 50s. She had poured her life into that bakery. It wasn't just a job, it was her dream realized. She moved to Harmony Creek 20 years ago, a single mother with a passion for baking. People said her laughter was as warm as her ovens. She knew everyone's name, their stories, their favorite pastry. Maria's sweet mornings became a local institution, a place where milestones were celebrated and sorrows were shared over coffee and cake. She was the unofficial town therapist, the always listening ear. Her kindness radiated. Then there was Leo Maxwell, just 19. He was a newer face in Harmony Creek, or rather, on its fringes. He lived with his struggling aunt in a rundown apartment complex a few miles from the town center. People didn't know him well. He mostly kept to himself. Quiet. Some said he looked lost. He'd dropped out of school. He had a string of short-lived, low-paying jobs. There were whispers about a difficult childhood, about a father who wasn't around, about a mother who tried but couldn't cope. Leo was drifting, aimless. These two lives, Maria's and Leo's, were worlds apart. One was rooted in community, warmth, and success built on hard work. The other was marked by instability, isolation, and a growing sense of desperation. Maria woke up each day with purpose. Leo woke up each day with uncertainty. She planned menus and greeted customers. He wondered how he would make it through the week. They existed in the same small town, yet their paths had never meaningfully crossed. Until that one dreadful morning. The collision was inevitable, perhaps. A tragic intersection of light and shadow. Maria, the pillar of the community. Leo, the young man on the edge. What led him to her bakery? What made him cross that line? Was it a calculated decision or a moment of blind panic? These were the questions that would soon haunt not just the police, but everyone in Harmony Creek. Everyone who knew Maria, and everyone who now knew of Leo. Their stories were now intertwined. Detective Miller was assigned the case. He was a local too. He knew Maria. He'd bought his daughter's birthday cake from her bakery just last month. This case was personal for him, like it was for everyone. He started with the basics, the crime scene. It was messy, clearly a struggle. Not much money was taken, a few $100s from the till. It seemed amateurish, desperate, not the work of a professional criminal. This detail stuck with Miller. It felt impulsive. The town of Harmony Creek was on edge. Doors were locked earlier. Parents kept a closer eye on their children. The usual friendly nods between strangers were replaced with cautious glances. Fear is a quiet poison. It seeps in. The bakery remained closed. A daily, silent testament to the violence that had occurred. People left flowers, cards, small tokens of support for Maria. She was still in the hospital, stable, but the recovery would be long. The physical wounds, and the others. The ones you couldn't see. The investigation crawled. There were no security cameras inside Maria's bakery. She'd always said she trusted her customers, a heartbreaking irony now. Miller and his team canvassed the neighborhood. They interviewed everyone who lived or worked nearby. Did anyone see anything, hear anything? Most people reported nothing unusual, just the ordinary sounds of a town waking up. Then the sirens. The routine was broken, shattered. The lack of immediate leads was frustrating. For Miller, for the town. Days turned into a week. The initial shockwave passed. A dull ache remained. People wanted answers. They wanted justice for Maria. They needed to feel safe again. Detective Miller felt the pressure. He re-examined every piece of evidence, every statement. There had to be something, some small detail they had missed. He kept coming back to the amateur nature of the crime, the minimal cash stolen. It pointed to someone who wasn't thinking clearly. Someone who was perhaps at their wits' end. But who? The break in the case came from an unlikely source, a 10-year-old boy named Sammy. He lived a few streets away from the bakery. He often cut through the alley behind it on his way to catch the early school bus. That morning, the morning of the attack, he'd seen someone, a young man, running from the direction of the bakery. The man looked scared. Sammy had been scared too. He hadn't told anyone. He thought he might get into trouble, or that the man might come after him. Kids think like that. Sammy's mother noticed he wasn't sleeping well. He was jumpy. After a few days of gentle questioning, the story tumbled out. She immediately called Detective Miller. Miller listened patiently to Sammy. The boy was nervous, but his description was surprisingly clear. Tall, thin, wearing a dark hoodie, carrying a backpack. He remembered the backpack had a distinctive patch, a faded band logo. This was it, the detail Miller needed, something tangible, something to chase. Miller knew he had to handle this carefully. Sammy was a child witness. He didn't want to traumatize him further, but his information was crucial. The description of the backpack, that was key. It was specific. Miller's team started checking local pawn shops, second-hand stores. They showed the band logo around. They asked about young men matching Sammy's description. It was old-fashioned police work, knocking on doors, asking questions, following a faint trail. Then, a pawn shop owner remembered. A young man had come in a few days after the robbery. He'd sold a few items, including a backpack matching the description. He'd seemed agitated. The shop owner had security footage, grainy, not perfect, but good enough. Detective Miller watched the tape. He saw a young man. His face was mostly obscured by the hoodie, but for a split second he looked up. Miller recognized him. Leo Maxwell, the quiet kid from the outskirts of town. The pieces clicked. The arrest was quiet. No sirens, no drama. Detective Miller and another officer went to Leo Maxwell's apartment. Early evening. His aunt answered the door. She looked tired, worried. When Miller asked for Leo, he appeared from a back room. He looked younger than 19, and scared, very scared. He didn't resist, he didn't say anything. It was as if he'd been expecting them. The fight had already gone out of him, or maybe it was never really there. At the station, the interrogation room was stark, just a table, 3 chairs. Leo sat hunched over, he barely made eye contact. Miller started gently. He talked about Harmony Creek, about Maria, about how much she meant to the community. He didn't accuse, not at first, he just laid out the facts. The timeline, the backpack, the pawn shop footage. Leo remained silent, but Miller could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he picked at his fingernails. The truth was close to the surface. Then, Leo started to talk, softly at first, his voice cracking. He said he didn't mean to hurt Maria. He was desperate. He needed money. Rent was due. He hadn't eaten properly in days. He thought the bakery would be empty that early. He just wanted the cash from the register. But Maria was there. He panicked when she confronted him. He pushed her. She fell. He saw her hit her head. He grabbed what little money he could find and ran. He never looked back. Until now. The confession tumbled out, filled with remorse, with fear, with a profound sense of failure. Leo cried. He wasn't a hardened criminal. He was a scared kid who had made a terrible mistake. A mistake with devastating consequences, for Maria, for the town, and for himself. Detective Miller listened. He had his confession. The case was solved in a way. But looking at Leo, he knew the story wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The legal process was just beginning. Section 6. The Weight of Justice. The trial was swift. Leo Maxwell pled guilty. There was no lengthy courtroom battle, no dramatic cross-examinations. His lawyer advised it. The evidence was strong. The confession was clear. Harmony Creek watched closely. The courtroom was packed every day. People wanted to see justice done. They wanted to understand. How could this happen? Why Leo? The town needed closure, or at least the beginning of it. Maria was not present. She was still recovering at home. but she submitted a victim impact statement. Maria's words were read aloud by the prosecutor. They were powerful, not filled with anger but with deep sadness. She spoke of her bakery, her dream. She spoke of the fear she now felt, the long road to recovery ahead. She didn't speak of hate for Leo. She spoke of the community she loved, and how this act had shaken its foundations. Her statement hung heavy in the air. There were tears in the gallery. Even Leo, head bowed, seemed to shrink under the weight of her words. The judge listened to all sides. The prosecution detailed the crime, the impact on Maria, the fear in the community. The defense painted a picture of Leo's troubled life, his desperation, his immediate remorse. They argued he wasn't a monster. He was a young man who made a terrible error in judgment. They asked for mercy, for a chance at rehabilitation. It was a difficult balance, justice for Maria, and what to do with Leo. What was the right path? The sentence came down. Leo Maxwell was sentenced to 7 years in state prison for aggravated assault and robbery. 7 years. Some in the community thought it wasn't enough. Others felt it was a fair sentence considering his age and his guilty plea. Leo showed no emotion as the sentence was read. He just looked down. Detective Miller watched him being led away. He felt a sense of duty fulfilled, but also a lingering unease. Was this the end of the story, or just a chapter closing? Section 7. Echoes in a Cell. Prison was a harsh reality for Leo Maxwell. The noise, the confinement, the constant tension. It was a world away from quiet Harmony Creek. The first few months were a blur of fear and regret. He kept replaying that morning in the bakery. Maria's face, the sound of her falling. The guilt was a heavy cloak. He was just a number now, another inmate, lost in the system. It would have been easy to sink deeper into despair, to become hardened. Many did. But something shifted for Leo. Perhaps it was the endless hours to think, or perhaps it was a conversation with an older inmate, a man serving a life sentence who saw something in Leo, a flicker of remorse that wasn't just self-pity. This older man named Earl ran a small informal reading group in the prison library. He encouraged Leo to join, to read, to write, to reflect. Earl had made his own terrible mistakes. He understood the long, dark tunnel of regret. Leo started reading, books about philosophy, about redemption. He started writing in a journal, pouring out his thoughts, his shame, his confusion. He also enrolled in a vocational program offered at the prison. A baking program, ironically. At first the idea felt like a cruel joke, but Earl encouraged him. Said maybe it was a way to connect with what he had destroyed. To understand the craft, the dedication, the joy Maria must have felt in her work. It was a difficult step. Slowly, Leo began to change. The anger and fear started to recede, replaced by a quiet determination. He excelled in the baking program. He found a focus he'd never had before. He started to think about the future, not just his own, but about Maria, about the harm he had caused. He knew he could never undo it, but maybe, just maybe, he could try to make amends, in some small way. The thought was daunting, but it was also the first glimmer of hope he'd felt in a long, long time. Section 8. Steps towards the light. After 4 years, Leo Maxwell was released on parole. Good behavior, participation in rehabilitation programs. He was older now, quieter. The fear was still there, but it was different. It was the fear of facing the world he had wronged. He didn't return to Harmony Creek immediately. He couldn't. Instead, he moved to a halfway house in a nearby city. He found a job. Washing dishes in a large institutional kitchen. Humbling work. But it was honest work. He kept his head down. He worked hard. One of the conditions of his parole was to participate in a restorative justice program. This involved writing a letter to his victim, if he chose to. Leo spent weeks on that letter to Maria Sanchez. He wrote and rewrote it countless times. How could he express his remorse, his shame? How could he ask for forgiveness he didn't feel he deserved? He finally sent it, not expecting a reply, just needing to send it, to acknowledge her pain, his responsibility. Maria, meanwhile, had slowly rebuilt her life, her physical wounds healed. The bakery, Maria's Sweet Mornings, eventually reopened, with the help of the community. Friends and neighbors volunteered. They painted, they cleaned, they helped her bake. It was a testament to her spirit, and to the town's love for her. She received Leo's letter. She didn't read it for a long time. The thought was too painful, but eventually she did. It was simple, honest, full of pain, her pain, and his. It took another year of Leo working, saving money, attending therapy. He started volunteering at a soup kitchen on his days off. He found a quiet satisfaction in helping others. He wanted to give back. to be more than his mistake. One day Maria contacted the Restorative Justice Program. She was ready, not to forgive, necessarily, but to meet Leo, to see the man who had caused her so much pain and who seemed to be trying so hard to change. It was a courageous step, for both of them. Section 9. Harmony Restored, Futures Rewritten. The meeting took place in a neutral setting, a community center. A mediator was present. It was quiet, awkward at first. Leo could barely look at Maria. He apologized again, face to face this time, his voice thick with emotion. He didn't make excuses. He just spoke of his regret, his journey in prison, his hope to live a better life. Maria listened, her expression unreadable for a long time. She asked questions, hard questions, about that morning, about his life, about his future. She told him about her recovery, about the fear that still lingered sometimes, about how the community had rallied around her. She didn't offer easy absolution, but she acknowledged his efforts. His remorse seemed genuine. She saw not a monster, but a young man who had lost his way, and was now trying desperately to find a new path. It wasn't forgiveness, not in a single moment. It was something more complex, an understanding, a possibility of peace, for both of them. Leo eventually moved back to an area near Harmony Creek, not into the town itself. He found work in a larger bakery in a neighboring city. He continued his volunteer work. He spoke sometimes to at-risk youth, sharing his story, warning them about the consequences of choices. He knew he would carry the weight of his actions forever, but it was no longer a crushing weight. It was a reminder, a motivator to keep doing better, to keep making amends in the only way he could, by living a decent life. Harmony Creek healed, slowly. Maria's sweet mornings thrived once more. It was still the heart of the town, perhaps even more so now, a symbol of resilience, of community strength. Maria still baked, she still smiled. Her laughter, perhaps a little softer, still filled the shop. The story of Leo and Maria became a part of the town's fabric. A difficult chapter, but one that ultimately spoke of human frailty and the incredible capacity for change, for redemption, even after the deepest darkness.